0, 1. Let's get started.
Hey Inspirers, I'm John Register and welcome to the Elevate Life, where we do more than just talk leadership. We transform it. This show is for leaders walking through high stakes transitions. If you've just been promoted, just taken a hit, or just realized the game has changed while you were still playing the old one, this is your home. Let me tell you why I do this. I was a two-time Olympic trials qualifier, a Gulf War Army veteran, until one misstep in a hurdle race changed everything. That injury led to the amputation of my left leg and the end of my military career. But it also sparked a deeper journey from rehab to the Paralympic podium and ultimately to the platform I stand on today, coaching executive leaders just like you on how to amputate what no longer serves you so you can elevate everything that does. I created the Elevate Life community because I know what it feels like to lose momentum, to question your identity, and outgrow your current leadership tools. That's why I host a monthly executive strategy session, a space where we don't just talk mindset, we build the actual map. And I'd love for you to join us. The link to register is in the description. Now, let's talk about today's ThinkLetter. I'm featuring Mark Griffin, a national rugby standout, social entrepreneur, and founder of Purpose Fused. We sat down and had a powerful conversation about what it really means to move from obsession to significance. Mark shares how chasing traditional success left him unfulfilled and how stepping back to pursue significance transformed everything. His mission, his business, and his leadership model in today's uncertain and consistently shifting market is the mindset that is insightful and is essential. Because if you're only chasing success, you'll burn out. But if you chase significance, you'll build something that lasts. Ready? Let's begin. Amputation isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to cut ties with a part of ourselves we once called strength. Mark Griffin had to amputate his obsession, not because he lost drive, but because he almost lost himself. Let's take a look at the clip.
Absolutely. We met out in an event out in California, and I really loved getting a chance to meet you and know you better. What is one thing that you've had to amputate in order to elevate to your success?
Well, I hope you'll be impressed with the fact that not necessarily the answer, but the fact that you asked that back when we were back at the conference.
I did.
And I was thinking, and how long we got to answer this question. And of course, I came up with one word, which was ego. But I was like, I don't know really if that's right. So since then, I've been kind of thinking about it a little bit and thinking through different challenges I've had to overcome, and I've actually refined it a little bit. And there's a sense of ego that plays into it. But the answer is actually it's amputating obsession. And what I mean by that is my natural way of being, the way I'm just naturally wired and energized, is around possibilities and people. And so that's awesome when I see possibilities, right? And you may be the same. Like you see things positively, and you see possibilities, and you see opportunities and challenges, and that's great. And if I feel like I can convene people, engage people in those possibilities, bring it on, right? I'm going after it. And the passion comes out, and for the most part, that's really impactful, and it engages people, and it makes an impact, it makes a difference, etc. I think what I've learned through reflecting back on some of the challenges is there's a trigger point which I may not have always been aware of, which is, well, when does passion convert into obsession? And it's funny because the conversation I had with my last podcast guest, and she brought it up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's me. And so, okay, so what's the difference and what's wrong with obsession? I think the thing for me is, if obsession is driven not so much by ego, because the ego I think is actually fine. Like ego is kind of like neutral, right? Ego is just sort of having some confidence, self-worth, and identity, and that's fine. When you start thinking of ego-ism and egotism, where it's sort of, oh, now it's a bit more about me than it is about doing the right thing, or even I'm trying to do something just to get the kind of attention and accolades, that's the stuff you've got to I've got to amputate, not other people. You can do what you like. That's what I've learned, I think, through some of those challenges. So if obsession is driven through kind of egotism, that's not a good thing for you, for the people you're surrounding yourself with. And it's very different to following a passion to do the right thing for the right people.
Too many high-performing leaders confuse passion with purpose. We chase opportunity like it's oxygen until we forget what it feels like to breathe. Mark's word hit me hard. There's a trigger point when passion converts to obsession. That line, that's the invisible edge most leaders don't see until they're already bleeding energy, clarity, and relationships. He wasn't driven by ego, at least not at first. He was energized by possibility, charged by people, inspired by what could be. But somewhere along the way, that drive got hijacked, not by malice, but by meaningless disguised as momentum. And I've been there too. I remember a time after my transition from the military when I felt like I had something to prove to everybody. I didn't just want to succeed, I needed to. I needed to validate the reinvention of myself. So I went hard, took every speaking engagement, said yes to every opportunity, booked more stages than I had space to think. And for a while, it looked like success, but it felt like suffocation because what I was really chasing wasn't impact, it was affirmation. I thought I was passionate. I was actually obsessed. That's when I realized if obsession is fueled by insecurity, it always demands more than it gives. That's when I had to amputate it and trust that what's aligned doesn't need to be chased. So here's the real cost. Obsession masked as ambition is destroying relationships, it's destroying leadership effectiveness in boardrooms, startups, and legacy organizations alike. It's not just burnout, it's blind spots. It's the CEO who won't pivot because the old way worked once. It's the founder who alienates their team chasing the next big thing. It's the executive who trades relational equity for quarterly numbers, thinking they're doing what's best for the company, when really they're just trying to feel worthy again. Obsession doesn't always look like ego. Sometimes it shows up as overfunctioning, perfectionism, micromanagement, or never being able to turn it off. It hides behind KPIs. It pretends to be culture, but it's a silent killer of innovation, retention, and trust. Just look at WeWork under Adam Neumann. The obsession with scale, fueled by charisma and unchecked by clarity, led to an implosion of one of the most hyped business models in the modern era. What started as passion became intoxication. And once that line was crossed, collapse was inevitable. So how do we amputate obsession without killing passion? Here's how I frame it using my resilience action model. The reckoning. Be honest. What are you really chasing? Are you driven or are you being dragged by the need to prove something? Your obsession might be rooted in a fear that has nothing to do with the task at hand. The revision. Shift your lens. Instead of asking, how do I win? Ask, what aligns with who I am right now? Let your calendar reflect your core, not your craving for applause. The renewal. Rebuild from values, not vanity. This is where clarity comes back, where you move from addicted to achieving to anchored into purpose. It's quiet, it's strong, and it's sustainable. So here's your challenge for this week, should you choose to accept it. Where in your leadership does passion need to pause? Where have you started managing outcomes instead of elevating impact? Ask yourself, is what I'm chasing still aligned with who I've become? If this hits home, don't scroll by, drop a comment, tag someone you trust to hold you accountable, and let's get ready for lesson number 2. Part number 2, when ego hides in excellence. The danger isn't always in being wrong, it's being misaligned. You can be excellent and still be operating from ego. Mark reminded me that leadership drift doesn't announce itself. It whispers until whispers becomes a wall. Check it out.
Have you found a self-awareness strategy or trigger point or something that gets you to understand when you might be dipping into egotism or one of the other isms that might go around that, and you're drifting more into self than you are onto others?
Yeah, I mean, this has all come up really recently. I think I've got a strategy around how I've bounced back or come back from those sort of challenges, which I learned obviously off the back end and have sort of refined and practiced, and it's actually part of how I coach. In terms of understanding the triggers, yeah, I think I think it comes down to self-awareness, right, and having an understanding when something is intrinsically true, authentic, and aligned to, I call them principles. People will say values. Principles to me are just values in action. So if you understand what your values are and you can articulate those, if it's aligned to your purpose, my purpose is creating opportunities that inspire people to go forward as the ultimate version of themselves. Now, the risk of purpose is, wow, I can do that in lots of ways, and that could become obsessive. So then you've got to tap into your principles and say, okay, well, look, if these are your sort of 5 to 7 best self behaviors, to what extent is this motivation, whether it's passion or obsession, like where are you at? To what extent is this actually bringing out the best? Are you exhibiting these characteristics? And I would say that in those instances, there would have been other characteristics that I was exhibiting that would show up more often, even though maybe some of my best self characteristics were still present, but they were kind of getting sabotaged maybe, right, by some other things that were showing up. And I do think you're aware of that. You know when you're frustrated or angry or maybe even just being negative or saying something you would never usually say. That's not who you authentically are. That's who you've become because you've got into that sort of obsessive space. So I think it all comes back to self-awareness and an understanding of when are you at your best and to what extent are you aligned.
Most leaders don't fall off course in one big moment. They just drift slowly, silently, until the version of themselves they become looks nothing like the version they respect. That's what Mark uncovered when he started reflecting on how his passion had mutated into obsession. It wasn't just about overworking or overreaching. It was about over-identifying with the mission, with the role, with the applause. The antidote wasn't retreat, it was reflection. Mark shared that the way back to center begins with principles, not performance. What values are you actually living out? What characteristics show up when you're at your best? And when do those start getting sabotaged? That's the tension. You can still look like a leader on the outside while living in misalignment on the inside. Look, I had a keynote once that got a standing ovation for on the surface and a wake-up call underneath. I crushed the talk, hit every beat, landed every line, but I walked off stage feeling like I had performed the part of myself that I thought the audience wanted, rather than speaking from the deepest, most honest version of who I am. I was out of alignment, not with the message, but with the motive. I had been speaking for approval, not from alignment. That's the moment I realized I needed a self-awareness practice, a ritual that helped me recognize not just how I showed up, but who was showing up in me. That became my practice of what I now call a resonance check. Am I echoing truth or am I chasing applause? Here's what happens in leadership when we lose that resonance. Leaders who are out of alignment lose their influence long before they lose their job. Teams can feel it. They sense when decisions are reactive instead of principled. They notice when the visionary stops listening. They whisper when passion crosses into pushiness. And no one wants to say it out loud. This isn't theory, it's real. Think about Uber under Travis Kalanick, a brilliant founder whose principles eroded under performance pressures, toxic culture, lawsuits, internal power struggles, all symptoms of someone who couldn't see that he had drifted into a version of himself that no longer aligned with his original vision. He didn't wake up one day and decide to be a villain. He just never paused to ask, am I still operating from my best self or from the version that wins headlines? That's the risk for all of us who operate in high-stakes leadership environments. We build, we lead, we conquer. And sometimes in the success, we forget, look in the mirror. Here's how you interrupt that drift using the RE3 Resilience Action Model. Reckoning, call it out. What version of yourself is leading right now? Is it the one rooted in clarity and service, or the one reacting to pressure and proving worth? Revision. Revisit your principles, mark them values in action. Name your 5 best self behaviors and track whether your current mode of leadership reflects them. If not, it's time to revise your posture, not just your plan. And then finally, renewal. Practice resonance. Before your next big decision, ask, is this aligned with who I am at my best? Then make that alignment your leadership anchor, even when the noise gets loud. Here's your micro challenge this week. Name 3 of your best self behaviors. Now audit your last 7 days. How did those show up in your leadership? If your answer makes you uncomfortable, don't beat yourself up. Just listen to the whisper and start the realignment. If this spoke to you, hit the share, tag a leader you admire, or join me at the next Elevate Life Executive Strategy session. That's where we get back to the core of who we are so we can lead with clarity, courage, and conviction. The world doesn't need more leaders performing. It needs more leaders aligned. Now let's get ready for lesson number 3. See you over there. Part 3, why success isn't enough and never was. You can be wildly successful and still feel wildly misaligned because success isn't the real prize, significance is. And that difference will either ground your leadership or grind you to burnout. Take a listen.
Right? So that we can identify some of these ego that goes beyond just taking care of myself. It's only taking care of myself, right? and not about with others. How have those really shaped you and formed your philosophies to what you teach now?
It's really 3 things, and it's very, very aligned to yours, John. The first one is that you kind of just reframe your perspective. So it is that stepping back, but it's not just stepping back in the moment. It's stepping back from life, like properly going up to 10,000 feet and looking at your whole life. And so many successful people, by successful definitions, very successful leaders, one of the things they rarely do is to take the foot off the gas, step back, and really get a big perspective, right? Tap into your purpose, because that helps reframe your perspective. From that, then you kind of redefine some of the possibilities, because you start to see things differently. If you see things differently, you can see different possibilities. Your goal setting will be different. So from those possibilities, then you can really start to hone in some different priorities that bring out your best self. So reframe your perspective, redefining your kind of possibilities and your priorities. And then the last piece of that would be, you've got to then really revitalize what I say, practices and people. Practices, what are the things you're doing on a daily basis that you are literally practicing to get better at in real life? And who are the people that you're looking to impact? And who are the people on your support team to support you and hold you accountable? So that's a big part of my coaching. It's definitely a big part of my learnings from lots of the mistakes that I've made along the way and from the impact that I've had. And certainly that would reflect a lot of the journey that thousands of those kids had at Play Rugby USA, as well as the leaders and teams that I work with now.
Mark didn't just talk about amputating obsession. He pointed to what he had to replace it with. And that's where this whole conversation flipped from good to great, because it's easy to obsess over achievement when you're chasing status, but eventually achievement without alignment just feels empty. What Mark found was that chasing success for its own sake didn't move him, but striving for significance did. And that shift has reshaped how he leads and how he coaches and how he redefines and defines his purpose. When I was training for the Paralympics, I thought the gold medal was the goal. I told myself it was about the legacy. But the truth is, I was still proving something to myself and maybe even to the world. It wasn't until I started coaching other athletes and helping amputees walk again that something clicked. I stopped chasing my own worth and started investing in others' growth. That was the move from personal glory to communal gain, from success to significance. That's when the elevation happened, and it still drives every keynote, every coaching call, every word that I write. Significance isn't louder than success, it's just deeper. Here's what makes this conversation essential for high-stakes leaders like yourselves. Success will get you applause, but only significance will get you peace. Too many executives climb the mountain only to find the summit is lonely, and the view isn't enough to sustain them because they were scaling someone else's definition of success. Money, promotion, status, seats at the table that no longer fed their soul. Mark could have stayed in banking, made his millions, retired early. Instead, he left the corporate ladder to launch Play Rugby USA and Purpose Fused. He shifted his entire metric from what do I gain to who can I elevate? That pivot created an impact legacy that outlived the scoreboard. It required stepping away from the noise of comparison and to the pressure to perform, and stepping into clarity about what mattered most. In his words, he had to reframe his perspective, redefine his priorities, and revitalize his practices and people. That's how leaders move from burnout to breakthrough, from activity to alignment, from being remembered for what they built to being honored for who they helped build. If we're building things to get us to be alone, why would we ever do that? Let's drop this into the RE3 Resilience Action Model. Reckoning. Mark had to admit that his version of success was starting to feel hollow, more performative than purposeful. That required telling the truth. Success alone wasn't enough. Revision. He stepped back, not just in the moment, but at the life level. He zoomed out, reframed his perspective, and began asking different questions. Who am I helping? What am I building? What really matters? Renewal. And then he rebuilt from there with new priorities, new practices, and new people to fuel the mission. That's how he moved from impressive to impactful, and why his influence endures far beyond the pitch or the podium. Let me ask you, are you still measuring your life by someone else's scoreboard? Is your success aligned with your significance or competing with it? Try stepping back this weekend, not to retreat, but to realign, because sometimes the next level isn't up, it's deeper. If this hit home, come talk it out with me and other purpose-driven leaders. Join the next Elevate Life Executive Strategy Session. We're doing real work on what matters most, and I'd love to see you there. Sign up at the link and let's elevate together. Stay tuned as I wrap up today's session. I hope you enjoyed that. So let me leave you with this. The world doesn't need more successful leaders. It needs significant ones. Leaders who know when to step back, who can recognize the climb is no longer worth the cost, and who have the courage to redefine success on their own terms so that they can elevate everyone that is around them. If this resonated, I want to invite you once again to join me for the Elevate Life Executive Strategy Session. This is not a webinar, it's a working session. It's where high-performing leaders come together to map their transition, rediscover purpose, and act with clarity. You'll walk away with a sharper mind, a focused mission, and a next steps that aligns with who you are becoming. The link's right here in the description, so sign up and let's go elevate together. Remember, the podcast drops each Wednesday. Just go to John Register Live on YouTube to catch the most recent one. Until next time, go forth, inspire your world. Bye for now.